And now,
from Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the Sandton Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Well, straight into it this week. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 188. It's week 13 of 2025. And of course, let me remind you that the Sandton Times Hour is always available to you wherever you are, whenever you are, online, on all the leading podcast platforms, including Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Party, AfroPods. There's a whole list, but you can catch it anywhere online whenever you want to listen to it again. Or if you're traveling, you're on your way, and you want to catch up on some good listening, you can subscribe and make it part of your audio digest. I'm Alexander Leipner, and a special welcome to everyone listening for the very first time. If that's you, special welcome to you. Talking to you specifically. And of course, if you are part of the Sandton Times Hour Nation and you're in Greater Gauteng, across South Africa, and of course anywhere else in the world, online or on air, I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land. And as always, I'd like to remind you that if you want to send through your questions, your comments, your feedback to the show, you can use a myriad of channels. There's no excuse. You can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media at Sandton Times on your preferred social media platform, if that's Facebook, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. I mean, there's a list to choose from. And of course, there's also the exclusive Sandton Times WhatsApp line, 084 Sandton. 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. 084 726 3866. Feel free to save that, and you can send through your questions, your comments, your voice notes, text messages, or whatever else you have. Make that part of your WhatsApp rundown as well. Joining the team in the studio again, behind the mixing desk, Vincenzo. It's good to have you here again. And I think a good week all round. But yeah, we have to get into this week's show quite quickly because we've got so much lined up and so much to get through. But before we do that, we broke the ice on the WhatsApp line. Took us a little bit of time, but we got our first couple of WhatsApps that came through, and I do want to acknowledge those. And the first one was from Andre, who sent through testing. This the Sandton Times? Yes, it is the Sandton Times, Andre. Yes, you are right. You've tested it well. The WhatsApp line works perfectly, and I'm glad you made use of it, and I'm hoping to hear more from you in the coming weeks. And also, we got a couple of unknown ones, which, I mean, we can't quite figure out who sent it because they didn't add their name or where they're from. So if there's something to be learned from this, make sure you put your name and where you're from on the WhatsApp so we can at least say, hey, it was you from there. And thanks for sending it through. So this is one of the unknown ones. It says electric vehicle sales in South Africa, and next week, yacht sales in the Sahara. I think this is a very tongue-in-cheek comment based on the electric vehicle conversation we had last week. So thanks for sending that through. Another one also, once again, one we couldn't figure out, but we're going to get better at this. VW is moaning about not being able to compete with the Chinese vehicles that are flooding the market, but they need to talk to the local labor unions. It's all very well to go for higher and higher wages, but these will ultimately lead to fewer jobs. South Africa simply isn't competitive in the global markets. Well, another comment there from the WhatsApp line about that conversation we had about the cost of motor vehicles, the influx of Chinese vehicles coming into the market, and an opinion there. So it's good to see that you're making use of the WhatsApp line, and I hope we're going to upgrade to voice notes soon, and we're going to have more of these to read out in the coming weeks. Back to business. What are we chatting about this week? Well, in a bit, I'll be finding out more about the planned expansion of the Gautrain network. So the network we have at the moment is sort of a phase one. There's more to come, and I'm going to find out in just a bit what that could look like. Then there's a new network that hopes to connect South Africans around the world and start leveraging our unique abilities and our unique South Africanness. Stay listening. This is going to be a really great chat. And finally, I'm going to touch on a little recognition that the Sandton Times has received over the last couple of weeks. And that should wrap up the week for this week. Stay listening. It's all coming up in the next hour.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So the Gautrain started, I remember it quite well, around 2010. It was a few months before the World Cup kicked off, and I think it was the connection between Sandton and the airport. And then as the months unfolded, the additional stations came online. And now the stations that we all know now, Rhodesfield, Marlborough, Centurion, Hatfield, and of course OR Tambo, Sandton, Park Station and Rosebank have been an integral part of many people's lives who make their way in and around Gauteng. And also, connect in Sandton and get to work. And I use it quite regularly to get to the airport. There's been a lot of discussion around the Gautrain expanding over the years. It's had a good run so far, but I suppose now it's time to start stretching its wings, or is it rails, and find new stations to go to. And here to chat to me about this is the Gautrain Management Agency Acting Chief Operating Officer, Victor Shange. And Victor, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you, Alex, and good day to you and the listeners. Appreciate the opportunity once again.
Well, Victor, before we get into all things expansion, one thing I have to quickly touch on is the recent incident that you had with somebody digging a borehole, digging into your tunnel. That has all been resolved. You've managed to repair the infrastructure. Everything's running as per usual.
Yes, and thanks for the question. So since the incident, we've managed to leverage on our contracting and project management abilities to procure a suitable partner. And then the repair was actually in two phases. The one is we patched or plugged the hole that was created above the tunnel itself. And then about a week or two later, then we actually repaired the concrete lining that forms part of what we know as the tunnel underground. So for all in all, the repair work is done. The other process from a legal perspective in terms of between us then and the people who cause the damage, that is an ongoing process in parallel. Ours was to make sure that the service returns to normal as soon as possible while we pursue the other avenues in and around the legal process.
Fair enough. And those wanting to dig further boreholes, be warned, don't let this happen again.
Indeed. And all that we're pleading for is that people follow the law. And the law is twofold. Before you sink a borehole, you go to a local authority for permission. In instances where you really don't know where the rail reserve is, or any other infrastructure, by the way, because it's not limited to Gautrain. This could have been a gas pipe. It could have been a power cable. It could have been anything, any other infrastructure that services the greater community. So we're just pleading with those that need to drill boreholes or any other excavation, get the appropriate approval from the local authority as well as the Gautrain Management Agency so that we can then confirm that it is safe, or if indeed we have infrastructure, we can then give you the conditions under which such construction can take place.
Well, it's also good to see that your inverted commas disaster management plans kicked in very quickly, and that you're back up and running in, I'd say, a matter of days, if not weeks, which is, I suppose, also quite comforting for you to know that if these things happen, you guys can operate quite quickly again.
Indeed, and we also, maybe if I may just show some appreciation to our partners on the Gautrain. That the level of cooperation that between us enabled us to actually then trigger our disaster recovery and repair the hole as soon as practically possible.
All right, great. Well, we just had to talk about that because it is quite topical. I'm sure it's still top of mind, but at least we've managed to tick that box and get onto that. There's bigger things to discuss. It's the draft route determination report, which sounds quite dramatic and quite academic, and then also the Gauteng Rapid Rail Integration Network extensions that are planned. Now, in layman's terms, we're basically talking about the Gautrain looking to expand and add more stations. Have I got that right?
That is correct.
So we're looking at, I think specifically the Soweto extension and the Cosmos City junction. Is that sort of call it phase 2 to what is already phase 1 that's existing for the Gautrain to start expanding into?
I think earlier on in your opening statement, you alluded to the fact that we've got the current Gautrain between Park Station through Sandton to Hatfield to Otia, Rhodesfield, etc. So when people refer to Gautrain 2 or Gautrain expansion, the actual technical term is the Gauteng Rapid Rail Integrated Network Extensions. We then use the acronym of GRRIN. So when we speak about GRRIN extensions, it's actually the extensions to the Rapid Rail Network. Now, regarding the route determination process, and rightfully so, is that it sounds very technical, but because it's legislated, we actually borrow the same language that is used in the legislation, which is referred to as the Gauteng Transport Infrastructure Act. I'm going to come to another acronym now, GTIA, as we refer to it. So it sets out what this route determination process is. If I may just quickly spend time on why we do route determination.
Yes.
When you develop a provincial railway line in Gauteng, by the way, only Gauteng has the powers to actually develop a railway line out of interest. So we're the only ones with the law Every other province, it has to be developed by PRASA. Just, as a side note. Before you develop a provincial railway line, you follow two parallel processes. One is the run-of-the-mill project. You're going to design, you're going to procure, you're going to construct, etc. But there's a point at which you need to have the land available for the partner then who's going to help you or assist you in developing the infrastructure. So we run the project as a private-public partnership, and that is based on transferring risk to the private party as much as possible. And I say as much as possible because transferring risk also costs you money. So we also have to be responsible for what it means for the government and the fiscus. Once you've done a feasibility study, which we completed in 2017, that's the study on which then we base the extensions. That feasibility study explored many, many routes, many, many stations, but based on demand, which then influences the business case for the extensions, it proposed another 148 kilometers of additional pit rail network in Gauteng. And it's purely based on demand. So, it's not I don't wake up, the CEO doesn't wake up and decide that we're going to have a station there. It's purely based on looking at the spatial planning at current as well as the future. It looks at then, with that spatial planning being realized, where do people live, where are the job opportunities, where are the schools, etc. Then you do what is called a demand model. And that model then is the basis on which you then land on what route first, where to have a station, and where not to have a station, just by way of background. Because of the complexity and cost of an undertaking of this nature, those 148 kilometers were decomposed into 5 phases. So the first phase connects from Sandton through Randburg, Cosmos City, down to Little Falls. The second phase connects from Little Falls through Roodepoort to Jabulani, so the so-called Soweto extensions. Now, why stop a phase in Little Falls and then come back and do 2 stations later? It, again, as being as responsible public servants, we then had to look at the affordability part. Because of the terrain in the West Rand, i.e. the mountains and the hills, it requires a lot of tunneling. So at the time we did the feasibility study, the decision was then to split that into Little Falls. You can operate it as a system while you then construct the rest of it. Now, the Cosmos City Junction becomes important because the Cosmos City Junction is probably going to be the most complex, what we refer to as a junction station in the country, definitely, and possibly the continent, is that we will have basically 3 lines converging into one. So the line from Soweto will come to Cosmo. The line from Lanseria Airport will come to Cosmos City. The line from Samrand through Fourways and Sunning Hill will also converge into Cosmos City before it comes to Sandton. And that's why then we're doing this exercise. As I mentioned, we've done the feasibility. We're waiting then basically for approval to start the procurement process so that we can actually design and construct the first phase. In parallel, because the state has the responsibility of providing the land on which the railway line will be built, that's where the route determination comes in. So it's a first stage of a 4-stage process. It identifies a 400-meter wide corridor within which the future railway line can be designed and operated. Then once we're done with route determination, the next phase is called preliminary design. That's where now the design is in more detail. It's subjected to a full EIA. So typically it takes about 3 years. Why 3 years? You probably spend the first year designing. The second year you're running the EIA process. The third year you are now updating your designs based on the consultation and the outcomes of that assessment. And that consultation, Alex, is because in preliminary design you identify each and every property that's affected. Yes, the 400-meter wide corridor in route determination, we can see what properties are affected, but the next phase actually narrows it down. I think the narrowest, except for the tunnel, the narrowest that the fence to fence, it becomes about 40 meters. So in route determination, you may be impacted because you fall within the 400 meters, but when you come back to you with the preliminary design to consult, you may then realize that, oh, okay, as much as my property fell into within the 400-meter wide reserve, in preliminary design, I'm actually now 360 meters away from the fence, So that's the second phase. The other important thing with preliminary design is that is the basis on which we then have the conversations about expropriation. And just to confirm, as per the same act that GTI referred to, we don't just show up and tell you that we've expropriated your property. You get notified, and we then have independent property evaluators on our team. They propose a value to the owner. The owner then has the right to respond The response can be to accept what is offered. It can be to accept with conditions, i.e. maybe negotiate a higher price. The third option, which is probably not desired by both parties, is where we disagree. But most often, there's some agreement at a particular point. I mean, just case in point is a current Gautrain. It affected, I think, about in the region of about 1,000 properties, in its development, and in different guises. I mean, there are people, for instance, after we had expropriated a portion, where they would say, can we please keep the rest of it because it's still functional for me? And you see that typically if you drive on the N1 near Echo Park, when you look at the big viaduct that crosses the N1 and you see how close it is to that property, that's where an owner said, no, I still have use for it. So you can expropriate a piece of this, or I can keep this. In instances where the property becomes unuseful to the owner, if that's the word I can use, then that's where we speak about expropriation of the full property. In certain instances, Alex, we only expropriate rights. So it could be we just need, typically on a tunnel, for instance, we spoke about where they drilled, for instance. There's a servitude for the tunnel. And every owner who has a property above the servitude, so the original owner would have been notified and the rules in and around what you can and cannot do, what permission do you require to construct, including the whole borehole boring. So when that property is transferred to a subsequent owner, those things actually should appear legally on that offer to purchase, as an example. So at any given time, the owner of a property is always aware what sits under, in terms of rights, below them, above them, adjacent, if that's relevant at the time.
Well, that is quite an introduction. I'm chatting to Gautrain Management Agency Acting Chief Operating Officer Victor Shange, giving us an overview of the Gauteng Rapid Rail Integration Network extension plans. And there's also a public comment that is available and open until the 31st of March 2025. We're going to take a quick break and more on this in just a minute.
Connect with the Sandton Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za.
I'm in conversation with Gautrain Management Agency Acting Chief Operating Officer Victor Shange. We've been chatting about Gauteng Rapid Rail Integration Network extensions on the show this week. Some exciting plans, I think, for those who enjoy using the Gautrain, who enjoy using public transport or rapid rail. Certainly seeing more stations come online is not just exciting for being able to explore more of Gauteng, but also for people who are looking for other ways to get to work, especially as our streets and roads become more congested. There's been a lot of debate around the cost of using the Gautrain. I mean, we can't necessarily say that it's a bargain bin cheap alternative to traveling. Would this extension make it more economically viable, Victor, and create sort of economies of scale to potentially bring down the cost of using the Gautrain whilst also recovering the immense costs of expanding the route as well?
Indeed. So if I may just maybe depart from the current Gautrain and why the fare is where it is that at a particular point when the Gautrain was conceptualized and developed, it was the first of its kind in Africa. Whether it's perception or fact, the reality of it is that we needed international partners to deliver a project of this nature. It was new technology, new of everything. Yes, the country has immense or vast experience in railways in general, but it's the normal metros and the freight rail. This is and still is different technology to those systems, although they're all rail. With the perceptions and everything that comes with it from the international markets, the investors and the partners we needed would have then added a premium to what they would have charged. From a Gauteng's perspective in South Africa, for that matter, the technical studies had been done in terms of the need and what are the benefits of a project like this. And it goes beyond just transporting people. Maybe in another conversation we can speak about just the value chain in our supply chain and what it means in terms of empowerment economically of local businesses and so on. But so that's a premium that comes. So the second reason why then Gautrain is where it's at is that the system had to attract someone who drives a car. And so the service offering, the air conditioning, the reliability, in fact, it's better than even your own car in terms of our punctuality and availability. And I know that we've had some few challenges on the system. But overall and historically, we've averaged 99% availability and punctuality from a performance perspective. So the price is set, it's congruent to the level of service you are getting. Now, the question about fares of the Gautrain, it's actually not a Gautrain issue. Or rather, it's not limited to Gautrain, because any public transport system you can think of, there's a sector or a segment of the population that can't afford it. So whether it's metro rail, whether it's minibus taxis, whether it's buses, whether it's e-hailing or whatever else, the reality of it is that all these types of public transport are such that there's someone who can't afford it. The bigger question is, or rather the bigger challenge that we're faced as a country, is to reduce the issue of poverty, to reduce unemployment so that people can have meaningful jobs. And then by its nature, the ecosystem then from a transport perspective changes. Because at the moment, the problem is when you have such a high rate of unemployment, as an example, and the poverty levels are so high, what then happens is that the largest segment of the population actually can't afford public transport across the board. And then you are faced with this issue. Just, I suppose, because the Gautrain as a brand is out there and everybody is aware of how much it costs, to construct and so on. There's a lot of attention. And I'm not saying we don't have an issue. So I'm just giving context in terms of why the current system is at. The third aspect to it, Alex, is at the time of contracting, because of the aforesaid jitters I mentioned in around the international market and the partners, is there are certain things that we couldn't insist on. What are those things? As an example, there's no retail activity at a Gautrain station at present. Now, systems with retail, shops and so on and other facilities, such as an airport or the stations, even on the metro rail side and internationally, is that all those tenants pay rent to the railway operator. And those are the things that then end up subsidizing and enabling the reduction of a fare price. So these are the things that, with the experience we have on the current Gautrain, we are able to leverage that experience in making sure that the funding model for the extension is different, such that it doesn't solely rely on the fare revenue as well as the allocation in terms of the state. So we've done various studies, Alex, and we're looking at things like property development to be incorporated in our stations, and as well as other proposals that actually look to generating alternative revenue for the system, which then in turn enable a reduction in the fares. If I may just quickly just touch on it, then there's the part about, so somewhere between 2015 and 2017, we'd actually exceeded the capacity of the system. What do I mean by that? The ridership that we had was actually at a point where our trains were actually overcrowded in the peak. Fast forward then to 2020, 2021, of course, the lockdown. And what we're finding is that the travel patterns of people have changed significantly. You would have noticed when you're on the roads that, in fact, it doesn't matter how many lanes you add, it's never the solution. You still need rail to be the backbone of moving people around. But nonetheless, we are then developing products and marketing that aligns to this, that where are people going? Because they're no longer, the same person doesn't necessarily travel to Sandton, example, Monday to Friday. So they're still leaving their home, but where are they going? And these are the things that we're analyzing, so that there's a part about where we increase the footprint with our feeder services. Of course, you can't have those trips too long, because if the feeder trip, so if the bus takes longer to come to the station than you can drive to a destination, chances are you're gonna drive. So these are the things we're doing in the background in terms of increasing ridership on the Gautrain. On the current system, we're also incorporating various alternative funding and financing models to reduce ultimately the cost of building the system and operating the system, which then translates into lower fare prices. We're also looking at products that are targeted at those who really, really can't afford. So across the board, we are confident that the extensions are affordable based on the business case, which, although I mentioned that we completed in 2017, we're actually in the process of updating it now. You'll appreciate that there's been a lot of development since then, and we're being prudent to say, let's run the numbers again as we advance the project, that there's clarity from us actually achieving the business case and ensuring that the system is affordable to the people.
Well, I'm chatting to Gautrain Management Agency Acting Chief Operating Officer Victor Shange. There is so much to talk about, Victor. I feel like I actually need to get you back again because I think we need to have like an hour together because a lot of the answers are not straightforward and they're not sort of one-line answers. And there's obviously so much to get into. I've still got so many questions I need to ask you, but we're not even going to get to those. So we're going to leave it at that for now, but we're going to make a date again in the not-too-distant future to pick up on some of the other conversation points that we need to chat about. I mean, when is this all going to happen, etc., etc. But Victor, it's been great having you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thanks for the opportunity. If I may, maybe just a plea to your listeners, if those who are affected by the route determination of the Soweto Junction and Soweto Extension and Cosmo City Junction, if they can please submit their comments. Any comment and every comment is welcome through our official channels.
Fantastic. We'll put that up on the website as well. All the details you need, links, etc., etc., and then you can go check that out in your own time as well. So if you are affected, make sure that you also participate. We're at the halfway mark for the show. We're going to take a quick break and more of the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
And yes, going into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leipner. And if there's anything that sounded good on the show, but you didn't get all the details and you missed something or didn't have a chance to jot it down, well, don't stress. You can hop onto the website, sandtontimes.co.za, catch all the show notes there. And there's some more details, breakdowns, further reading, links, all those good things, and you can catch up on all the things that you heard. I know a lot of people also like to browse the website whilst listening to the podcast. That also helps, and then at least you can kind of do two things at the same time. What is it? Walk and chew gum, as they say. Also, you can check out the social media accounts at Sandton Times, and also don't forget to use the WhatsApp line 084 Sandton, which is 084 726 3866. That's 084 726 3866. You can send through your voice notes, text messages, and whatever else you come across, and that's exclusively the Sandton Times newsline or WhatsApp line. What do we call it? We have to give it a cool name. Talking about cool names, there's a new network that's launched this past week called the Lekker Network. It's a global platform which is designed to connect South African entrepreneurs, professionals, and business owners locally and internationally, which makes a lot of sense, right? And it's hoping to foster collaboration, mentorship, investment opportunities, obviously leveraging that cultural bond that South Africans have. It's that feeling of when you see a South African in an airport with a K-Wade jacket or a Springbok jersey or anything that looks vaguely South African. It's that feeling, but online. And hopefully also in the interest of business. And there's a certain inclusivity that we feel at the core of being South African. But here to chat to me about this new network and what it's hoping to do is one of the co-founders, Nic Latouf. Nic, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, let's talk about the Lekker Network. I mean, I briefly touched on it and gave people a brief idea of it. But in your own words, what is this new bold initiative that you guys have launched?
There are a million South Africans that have moved abroad, and so many of them are incredibly successful, but also there's something about South Africans, we're all super humble. So you don't often hear about these successes. So, the average South African doesn't realize how successful South Africans are everywhere around the world, in every country. And you'll find South Africans everywhere. So what we're saying is if we can connect the dots between everybody, locally and abroad, we can create the most incredible network of opportunity. Right? Not just for businesses, but for jobs, for knowledge sharing, for if you're a sportsman and you want to get into business or you're looking to connect with somebody globally, what better way to do it than through South Africans that have been there and done it and have those networks in all those different areas around the world. Quick example, if you've just launched the product in South Africa and you want to get your product into Walmart as an example, something that's super hard to do, I know that there will be a South African who will know somebody that will be able to do the right introduction for you. And we've seen that in the last 6 months of building, behind the scenes, we've seen this happen often. So we're saying that there's a big world out there. Let's get everybody connected and build the most incredible network of opportunity.
Look, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm just trying to think that person who knows somebody at Walmart, I think is Dion Friedland, the man behind Dion in South Africa. He was very close to Sam Walton, ex-South African. I think he's now living in the United States. I'm probably still a South African at heart, and I think he does visit quite regularly. I hope he joins the network sooner rather than later. But you're right, so many South Africans. I think one of the co-founders of Monster Energy Drink is South African. Obviously, you all know Elon Musk. There's sort of the very well-known South Africans that are doing very well, but in between, there's all these other South Africans that many people don't know about. I think the head of the NASA rocket propulsion unit is a South African as well. So it's amazing where we get to.
We hear these stories on a daily basis, news stories. I mean, there was a point where somebody was telling us that the founders of Paw Patrol are South African, and we looked into it, and they were born in South Africa and moved to Canada. But you're right, Monster Energy Drink is the more well-known one. Both founders of Monster Energy Drink, and it's the best performing stock of all time. We all know that story, but it's not about them. It's about the lesser known ones that are just incredible, and we all have this humility. And like I say, that's why we never hear of these stories. And again, it's not just the US; it's everywhere. It's across Europe, it's Australia, it's South America, it's China. You find incredible South Africans everywhere. And what's interesting about South Africans since we started this journey is how willing they are to help other South Africans. So how the whole thing started was I posted on LinkedIn a year ago, and the post read, "South Africans are South Africa's best export," and the post blew up. And I had South Africans messaging me from all over the world going, "Nick, you know what, you're right. We've been in Australia for the last 20 years and we have the most incredible connections in retail here. Send us opportunities, send us products. We're more than happy to help." And it was Australia, then it was New Zealand, and then it was Dubai, and then it was Abu Dhabi, and it was the Caribbean. And somebody messaged me from the Caribbean, and they go, "We've been living in the Caribbean for the last 10 years, and we know all the cruise ships. Is there a South African sunscreen we can get onto all the cruise ships?" It ran me off my feet, all the opportunity that was coming our way. So we thought, what an amazing, let's formalize this, let's create a real network, let's get everybody involved, let's get everybody signed up, and let's let the opportunity and the deals and the business flow.
So what does this network look like? Are we looking at something like a LinkedIn or a Facebook, or is this a WhatsApp group, or is this sort of a card-carrying membership where you sort of meet once a month in a town hall somewhere?
So it's going to be a bit of all of that. We've spent a lot of time studying the most successful networks in the world and looking at what works and what doesn't. We've been completely, transparent in the sense is by saying to everybody, we've never built a network. Everybody that's involved in this has built something. I built successful businesses, but none of us have ever built a network. So what it ultimately looks like in the end, we don't know. But what we did do was we opened it up to 200 founder members. And the founding members came in, and we spent a lot of time with the founding members, all South African, and saying to them, what is it that you need? What is it that you want? What is it that you're looking for? We got all of that information, and we started crafting a network out of that. So we did one-on-ones, we did group sessions, and all that information came back saying that people need connections, they need doors open, they're looking for business, they're looking for advice, small things, big things, etc. We're actually launching a tech platform that will allow everybody to connect. It will have all the information on the platform, and that will be the online location where everybody will connect. We do have WhatsApp groups. We have WhatsApp groups that are divided into, Lekker jobs. We have WhatsApp groups that are leads and needs, as an example. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for something in your business, just before this, I saw, somebody had posted on the jobs that they're looking for a paid media specialist, as an example, to hire that person. So central to everything that we've built is what we call our impact tracker. So we track on a weekly basis the impact that the Lekker Network is having on members and South Africans and South Africa, meaning we're tracking how many jobs are being created, meaning we're tracking how many business deals are being done, meaning we're tracking, if there's new businesses that are being started. So we're very intentional about making sure that there's a lot of value for the members, and that you're not just coming in there and we offering you a Zoom meeting once a week. We're making sure that people are doing business. We have a piece of tech that we've got that's going to connect dots between people. Going, you know what, Peter would be really good if they meet Paul, because they could potentially do a deal together. We're also training up team members that specifically do that and connect the dots between people. So that all happens online. Our next stage is that we are going to be building out chapters around the world, starting with London. And the reason we're doing London is, there are a lot of South Africans there, and time zone is good. And we're going to use that as a blueprint once we get it 100% right as to how to roll those out in other cities around the world, with the ultimate goal of getting as many members on as possible, because the more members, the better it is and the more opportunity that can flow. And we're talking about locally and abroad, every country in the world where you'll find South Africans. So that's ultimately how it's going to look. So there's going to be in-person forums and meetings, events, as well as a lot happening online. But ultimately, if you need something and you're part of the Lekker Network, you tell us or you tell the community, there will be somebody who will be able to help you and assist you. We've learned in business that it's not what or how, but who that makes all the difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've got a good component of South Africans listening to the show. So if you're listening to this somewhere in Qatar, New Zealand, the UK, the US, and this sounds interesting, we're going to put all the details up for the Lekker Network on the Sandton Times website as part of the show notes this week. And you can find out more how you can get involved. And co-founder Nic Latouf, the Lekker Network is up and running. And I thank you for making the time to chat to us.
Huge pleasure. And thanks so much for reaching out and letting us share our story.
It's a good question because lots of people have asked us that, what are you going to do going forward?
That's a great question.
It's a critically important question.
Such a great and interesting question.
I have not even thought about that until you just said it.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
Well, I made mention of this just as we got the show started, talking about the rundown of events for this hour. And beginning of this year, the Sandton Times received an email from an international award to say that the Sandton Times had been named the 2024 Best Regional Digital Media Company in South Africa by the Media Innovator Awards. And it's now in its second edition, and this Media Innovator Awards highlights outstanding achievements in a sector defined by rapid technological advancements, cultural shifts, and ever-evolving consumer demands. The story goes that the UK-based Media Innovator Awards celebrate the accomplishments of visionaries, creators, and leaders across all segments of the media industry. From content creators to tech innovators, these awards shine a light on those who are pushing the boundaries of possibilities. And winning such an award, as the award goes, is a significant privilege, signifying a business's dedication to excellence and its ability to adapt in a fast-evolving market. And I'm particularly proud and particularly humbled that the Sandton Times was nominated and then, of course, shortlisted and eventually won this particular recognition as the best regional digital media company for 2024. It just goes to show a lot of blood, sweat, and tears goes into this digital platform, of course, with the radio show, podcast, mobile app, weekly mailer, and so forth, and constantly expanding and constantly planning new and exciting things. Glad to see that it had paid off and this recognition was forthcoming. And of course, it can't be done without you, the community, the nation, the Sandton Times Our Nation, those who listen, those who subscribe, who read, who engage, who share opportunities in terms of content and all the things that have come through and been on the Sandton Times. It doesn't certainly happen as in isolation. I'm glad to see that we are growing from strength to strength, and a special thank you to you, all those who believe in the platform and are part of the platform and make all of this happen in one way or another. I really do thank you for this recognition, and may we go from strength to strength and continue to build on this in the coming years, hopefully with a radio award at some point as well. And I got a nomination for the podcast last year for a Pan-African Podcast Award. The show was shortlisted for Podcast of the Year, and what a great nomination. Didn't end up walking away with it, but we came second to another South African podcast, which I suppose isn't a bad thing as long as South Africa won it. That is always fantastic. So yeah, with that, it's all we have time for this week on the Sandton Times Hour. And as always, let me remind you that you can catch the Sandton Times Hour on a myriad of podcasts if you don't get a chance to catch it live on FM on 919. There's Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Podcast Party, and so many more fantastic digital places you can catch it. And you can re-listen to interviews, maybe share them with some people. All of that is very much welcome. And it's always great to see you giving it some good reviews and also growing the online community. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za or connect on social media @Sandton Times and hop onto the website sandtontimes.co.za. And if you haven't saved the exclusive WhatsApp number yet, The Sandton Times WhatsApp line is 084 Sandton or 084 726 3866. And feel free to send through your voice notes, text messages, and whatever other media you'd like to share. Thank you to all our guests for this week. Thank you to the team who pulls it all together every single week and makes sure that we get to you and we get to share all this interesting content with you. And thank you for listening. And God willing, we'll do it all again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.